Thank you very much for the kind invitation to come to this beautiful city. The last time I was in Minsk was in 1996, in the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster. And now, 22 years later, I came back, and look how wonderful this city has developed over the years. Congratulations, very much. In the previous presentation, we have heard that doctors like to treat. In case of recurrent abortion, they like to treat because you're a good doctor if you give medicine or whatever it is. But it does not always improve outcome. We have the same with the rise in caesarean section. I was told in Belarus that's now around 30%. So what's wrong with the women in Belarus? Why are they not able to deliver vaginally anymore? Specific problems? Or is it exactly the same that doctors want to treat and patients want to be treated, and that might be the reasons? Well, it is a worldwide problem, we know. Let's go to the increase in caesarean section over the years. And it started around 1970 with the introduction of fetal monitoring, and then doctors sometimes found that the heart rate was going down, and they said, we have to do a caesarean section to save your child. And then the baby came out, crying, and then the doctor said, well, we were just on time. And then the patient said, thank you very much, doctor, you must be a very good doctor. This afternoon we will discuss intrapartum monitoring, and we know that its contribution is only this small. But this was the beginning of the rise of caesarean section. Fortunately, anesthesia had become safer, so we could do more caesarean section. Then we started it to do with prolonged labors, indications widened, and doctors discovered that it was easy. That it was easy to do a caesarean section because that's only 35 minutes and delivery takes longer, and sometimes you even get paid more money. So what's the option? A long labor of 12 hours or a caesarean section of 35 minutes and more money? Unfortunately, more doctors choose to do a caesarean section. Then, of course, there was a loss of care during labor, medical legal issues, caesarean section is always fine. Then we started to do a caesarean section for all twins and breech deliveries and whatsoever. There was a further loss of skills. Nowadays, repeat caesarean sections are about 25% of all caesarean sections. And nowadays, also women want to do a caesarean section. Most gynecologists, wherever in the world I talk to, they say, yes, the women want to have a caesarean section. Well, in my opinion, that's not the case. It is doctors-driven. Doctors have promoted it. And if you do 60% caesarean section like in Greece, of course a woman will ask, can I also have a caesarean section? Because my girlfriend also had a caesarean section. That's the order, it's not the other way around. And if we move to Istanbul, the traffic jams, if you're there and you go to the private office of your gynecologist, he will tell you, well, if you had a spontaneous labor with all the traffic jams, I will never be on time in the hospital, so let's plan for a caesarean section. That's apparently where we are right now in the year of 2018. Worldwide figures, you can see them here. This is the worldwide average, around 20% nowadays, the blue line. This is Asia just on top. That is Europe, North America, and Australia, New Zealand, and that part of the world. And here we have South America on the top. This is Africa, this line. But this is sub-Saharan Africa, and this is the north of Africa. Look what's happening in the north of Africa. And in Egypt 10 years ago, They did 10% cesarean section, and now it has become 60% cesarean section. And Egyptian doctors have told me that now maternal mortality has increased and not decreased. Some figures worldwide, here we say Greece and Turkey and Italy quite high, 40–50%, China very high. The north of Europe, including my country, 16%, something like that. And if you move to the south here, Chile, and now it is over 60% already. There is a relationship between the incidence of cesarean section and the gross national income. The richer you are, per person, the more cesarean section, but you can see it goes a little bit like this. These are the very poor countries. Then there is an increase if the countries become richer, but then apart from a subgroup here in the middle income countries, you can see it seems to stabilize. And here you have Germany and the United States, and here you have the Scandinavian countries, including my country, the Netherlands. So more or less, this should be the stable percentage of cesarean section. These are the high ones, more than 40%. These are all in South America. But here is also your neighboring Georgia is here in the neighborhood. I think you're probably around here with 30%. Greece is forgotten. Probably the statistics have disappeared, but they're very high. And also China should be there because they're also above the 40%. Public versus private setting, yes, not in the very poor countries, but if the countries are a little bit richer, you can see there is a large difference between private setting and government or public setting. Look at the difference here in Bangladesh, which is a very poor country still. This is public setting, and that's the private setting. Dominican Republic, and you can see many more examples like that. Private patients usually are the most healthy patients, and they get the highest incidence of cesarean section. Isn't it a disaster? And let's go to the Czech Republic. Here you can see the cesarean section percentages of the 12 perinatal centers in the Czech Republic. Here is 2007, the green line. This one was very low. It's still low. It has increased a little bit, and that one was twice as high, and it's still twice as high 7 years later. And the difference is here between 22% and 40% cesarean section, with no difference in perinatal outcome. Czech Republic, small country, very small, look at the difference. So what should be the conclusion from these slides? That the incidence of cesarean sections has nothing to do with evidence-based medicine. It has more to do with the doctor's salary, with the lazy doctor who does not want to work at night, the doctor who has lost his or her skills to attend a difficult vaginal delivery, and in some country also with medical legal issues. And increase in cesarean sections, increase in direct maternal morbidity, complications in subsequent pregnancy, neonatal morbidity due to early delivery, and autoimmune and metabolic disease in the offspring. And there is no evidence for improved fetal outcome for cesarean rates that are higher than 10%. Here is the WHO statement on cesarean section 2015. At population level, cesarean section rates higher than 10% are not associated with reductions in maternal and newborn mortality rates. If you think 10% is too low, go to this publication in the JAMA, also 2015, and they figure out that it might be around 19%. But that's quite a bit lower than 30% or something like this. Let's go to direct morbidity, a publication in the Lancet on cesarean sections in Asia, China 45%, but also Vietnam and others are very high. And there were quite a few cesarean sections without indication intrapartum and antepartum. And from this slide you can see that also nowadays, when cesarean sections have become quite a bit safer than in the past, antepartum cesarean section without indication almost threefold increase in severe maternal morbidity, ICU admission, blood transfusion, hysterectomy, etc., and intrapartum without indication, even 14 times higher. Cesarean sections are very dangerous in Africa. This is a large American-funded publication on cesarean section in low-income countries. And you can see in the non-African side the relative risk of cesarean section for vaginal delivery is on average 1 to 2 times higher, not that high. But in Africa, here maternal mortality 14 times higher, unplanned hospitalization the same, hysterectomy 15 times higher, etc. But Africa is a specific problem. They do cesarean section too late, there is an inadequate infrastructure, and there are inexperienced healthcare workers. One cesarean section and the effect on the incidence of placenta accreta, increta, and subsequent hysterectomy in the next pregnancy. No previous cesarean section risk, 1 in 25,000. It almost doesn't occur, but after one cesarean section, it's already 1 in 500, and it may go up to 1 in 10 or something like that with subsequent pregnancies. And the risk of a uterine rupture in 0.4 to 1% of subsequent pregnancies, and if you have a uterine rupture, 10% of babies may die. Furthermore, an increase in infertility, and recent data have shown that there is also an increase in spontaneous preterm births following the first cesarean section, 2 to 3-fold higher. So you do the first cesarean section at term for whatever the reason, and then there is a considerable risk of that woman delivering preterm in the next pregnancy. More cesarean section, better outcome. Well, in fact, there's only one type of data. This was the huge term breech trial published in 2000 from Canada. If you do a cesarean section in case of a breech delivery, they indicated that outcome might be better. So we studied that in the Netherlands, and here in the Netherlands we had a 50% cesarean section rate in case of a term breech position. And directly after this publication it went up to 80%. So we could study before and thereafter. And nowadays we do 2,000 extra cesarean sections, and we could show that we indeed saved the life of 11 infants. However, if half of these women would have a subsequent pregnancy, there would be 10 uterine ruptures in the subsequent pregnancy. In other words, 1 uterine rupture for each infant saved. Moreover, one baby would die because of uterine rupture, so at the end we didn't save 11, but we saved 10 infants. But if you look at the risk of a hysterectomy and a placenta accreta in the next pregnancy, we could also calculate that there would be 1 maternal death for 80 children that we do save. And this is in a developed, rich country. Can you imagine how these figures will be in low-income countries? And if you look at publication, maternal deaths from the Netherlands, there are these case reports: first cesarean section for a breech delivery at term, second pregnancy, woman dies. It happens. It all demonstrates that progress in obstetrics is more difficult to achieve than many of us think. We think, oh, we do a little bit more cesarean section and then everything goes better. Well, that's not the case. Real life is different from what you think in the first instance. But in the meantime, many doctors have lost their skills to attend a vaginal breech or twin delivery. and do the cesarean section too early, before 39 weeks. Data from the United States, 36% of elective repeat cesarean section performed before 39 weeks of gestation, with a 2 to 4-fold increase in respiratory problems in the newborn, in admission to NICU, sepsis, treated neonatal hypoglycemia. Never do an elective cesarean section before 39 weeks, unless there is documentation of lung maturity. But unfortunately, doctors don't do that. What doctors now do is they do the elective cesarean at 37 weeks and give corticosteroids. Corticosteroids are poison, with some positive side effects. In early delivery, the positive side effects are wonderful. Give steroid before 34 weeks of gestation. But if you give it at 37, 38 weeks of gestation, long-term outcomes might be poor. Effects on immune response. These are the data on type 1 diabetes, childhood asthma, obesity, allergy, etc. The reason for that is a little bit unclear. It might be the absence of stress during labor, maybe altered epigenetic regulation, but this most likely plays a role. There is a different colonization of bacteria in the intestinal tract. And we need intestinal tract and the bacteria to develop our immune system. So here might be the background. 1 year after the cesarean section, still the bacteria in the intestinal tract are completely different from those of children born vaginally. And here is the large set of data of childhood onset type 1 diabetes and cesarean section. Overall, more than 20% higher. And here are similar data regarding to childhood asthma. These are large observational studies. However, no clear effects of low birth weight, breastfeeding, passive smoking. And if you look at the type of publication, there does not seem to be a publication bias because of this fun plot. So most likely it's true. And the same holds for this 25% increase in childhood and adolescent obesity in infants delivered by cesarean section, all due to changes in the development of gastrointestinal system. So it's time to consider the risk of cesarean delivery for long-term child health. Now it might be time slowly to change the trend of increasing cesarean section. This is a Lancet mini-series which will be published in October 2018 on the epidemiology, short and long-term impacts, intervention to reduce cesarean section, and there will also be a FIGO position paper, how to stop the cesarean section epidemic, from my Committee on Safe Motherhood Newborn Health. Please stop doing all those cesarean sections. And there will also be a commentary by WHO, by FIGO, our World Organization, by the midwives, and by the International Women Group. How do the Portuguese, how are they bringing the cesarean section rate down? Dissemination of knowledge, uniform classification system. Hospitals have to publish their cesarean section rate. The payment for the doctor of a cesarean section is the same as that for a vaginal delivery. And financing of hospitals is based on the cesarean section rate. More cesarean section, less money. And that works. And you can see, this started 4 years ago. There was an overall trend in the different regions, white is overall Portugal, of increase in cesarean section, and now in all the regions it is falling significantly. Now I lost a slide in between, because you may say, and what about perinatal morbidity or mortality? There is also in this publication is a trend on perinatal mortality. perinatal mortality was decreasing with the increase in cesarean section rate, but it's continued to decrease now that there is a lowering of cesarean section rate. So it's not affected by this cesarean section. Iran, cesarean section rate rose from 35% to 48% in 2014. No effect of mother-baby friendly initiative, standard protocols, etc. But in the governmental hospitals there was an initiative in 2014, National Childbirth Free of Charge, improved privacy in the labour wards, adequate pain relief, financing incentives promoting national health births, and also the cesarean section rate affects hospital rating. And what was the effect? In 15 months, a reduction of 10% in the cesarean section rate. China, Shanghai area, over 7 years, a reduction from 52 to 36% in cesarean section rate. How? Exactly the same. Education, support, adequate pain relief, and change in the reimbursement model for doctors and hospitals. That seems to work. Unfortunately, some lines here, because these are from our figure position paper to be published in the Lancet. The delivery fees for physicians for undertaking cesarean section and attending vaginal delivery should be the same using a mean. This should also happen in private settings. Hospitals should be obliged to publish annual cesarean section rate, and financing of hospitals should partly be based on cesarean section rate. And of course, if you're in a higher risk hospital, your rates may be higher than if you're in a lower risk hospital. Hospitals also should use a uniform classification system, and there is the Robson WHO classification. Women should be informed properly on the benefits and risks of a cesarean section. And money that will become available from lower cesarean section costs should be invested in resources, better preparation for labor and delivery, better care during labor, adequate pain relief, practical skills training for doctors and midwives, and reintroduction of vaginal instrumental delivery, because in many countries, especially in Africa, but also in the south of Europe, doctors have forgotten that they can do a ventouse extraction or a forceps extraction. The situation in very low-income countries requires special attention, considering that access to cesarean section is still insufficient in rural areas, whereas cesarean sections seem to rise inappropriately in some urban areas and can be associated with substantial maternal morbidity and mortality. If you go to Africa, in the capital, sometimes they have cesarean section rate of 50%. If you go to the rural area, 2%. Both are wrong. 2% is too low, 50% is far too high. Both situations are unwanted, and the rural areas access to skilled care, to appropriate fetal surveillance and assisted birth is essential. Also there, we need to have in those areas the possibility of vaginal instrumental deliveries. This is a new device now being tested by WHO and others. It looks like a plastic bag. You can introduce it like this and do a ventouse extraction like that. It's very simple. I've not done it in the real life, but I've done it on a mannequin. It seems to work, and maybe a device like this one will help doctors to convince to start again doing vaginal instrumental deliveries. And this was the summary of our paper. Worldwide, there is an alarming increase in cesarean section rate. The medical profession on its own cannot reverse this trend. Joint action with governmental bodies, your Ministry of Healthcare, the healthcare insurance industry and women's group are urgently needed to stop unnecessary cesarean sections and enable women and family to be confident of receiving the most appropriate obstetrical care for their individual circumstances. These are the French. Construit par plaisir, construit pour la vie. In other words, made with quite some pleasure and fun, and constructed for life. And in between, I hope, delivered vaginally, at least in the vast majority of cases. Thank you very much for your attention.